We're watching Neil deGrasse Tyson absolutely take a fat fucking hot shit on top of Ben's head. So I'm not huge on Neil deGrasse Tyson just for the fact that he's very condescending, but I can be too. So it's kind of hard to criticize someone over that. But he can be very condescending. Like, he can be a little shit sometimes. But I saw this and like Ben he got his shit rocked. Like, I saw half of it, got his shit absolutely rocked. And it's really funny because Ben has his whole audience in an echo chamber so hard that people think that he won. Like, his fans think he won. But like, we're gonna watch this together. Watch Ben get absolutely shit on. Okay.
The argument that is typically made by gender theorists is that gender is entirely separate from sex. You've seen the argument made that it makes no difference on average if men are stronger than women are, and that if we were to allow transgender women to compete with non-transgender women, then this would somehow not disadvantage biological.
Right off the bat, Ben hits him right off the bat. Okay, so the argument is that if we were putting trans people on hormone, like under hormone therapy, like assuming that there was a biological man, we gave him like estrogen, like gave him a female puberty, or her a female puberty in this case, then she would generally be on an equal playing field as most biological women. Like, that's what all of the studies have shown. We're not saying that if we just popped an only socially transitioned woman into the women division, that she would not do better than all the rest of the women generally. But if they're like properly treated with their designated hormones, generally they perform the same way if they go through a female puberty.
Women, and this seems to me absolutely ascientific, that if we're actually going to have a discussion about gender and sex, that should be based in data, which suggests that mammals are in fact binary in terms of their sex, unless you have intersex birth defects typically, or genetic defects.
I'm happy to opine on this. This only matters because today we segregate nearly all sports by gender. Otherwise, why do we even give a shit? what someone identifies with? So we live in a free country, and with consenting adults and people free expression of who and what they are.
On an adult level, I agree with you. I mean, it doesn't matter what you teach children.
Saying. And so there's the matrix of what you are biologically, how you express yourself, who you choose as a sexual partner. If we actually live in a free country as we tell ourselves, people's freedom to behave in any of those ways should not concern you at all. Nor are they requiring that you behave that way. Okay? This is for their own freedoms, because we live in a free country. Now, what is unresolved here is, what do you do with sports? It's unresolved. And I follow that closely, and I don't see any meaningful solutions that come down off of that. We know that hormones manifest differently in different people, and there's the whole thing with steroids. Steroids are hormones, right? And we rallied against steroids in professional sports because it gives you an undue advantage. So I've tried to think of what the future of sports would be in the world of a gender spectrum. And it may be, you don't specify whether it's a male or female sport. You just take measurements of what your hormonal balances are. And so you compete based on your hormonal. This is thought I had.
Look at how fucking mega based he is on this shit. Like, putting Richard Dawkins to shame. Like, fuck Richard Dawkins, okay? Neil absolutely putting both Ben and Richard Dawkins to fucking shame, okay? Mega based, right? Absolutely separate sports on hormones. Yeah, for fucking sure. Who cares if a trans person wants to be trans? Right? That's not affecting Ben. The fuck does Ben have to do with that? So good. Such good shit. Nadon. Holy shit. Another reason for separating sports based off of hormones is because some women actually, like some biological women, right, actually do get barred from competing in women's sports because they have too much testosterone. Like, just naturally. They have naturally too much testosterone, so they're barred from competing in the women's division, even though they were biologically women, born women, right? They're not trans. They just naturally have more testosterone. And I'm not going to say that that's like a common thing, right? But not only would we have the benefit of including trans people in their correct categories, but we would also be including those people as well. Or we could separate it on weight divisions, because generally, if we were separating on weight, there's not going to be a huge difference between a man that weighs like 150 pounds and a woman that weighs like 150 pounds. There's a lot of ways to separate, you know?
Care that sports is an interesting activity.
I guess the area where it does come up in a non-sports area.
Yeah, tell me, I don't know.
So it would be you talking in your book about the education of children and teaching children about science. And right now, children are being taught about the quote-unquote gender spectrum, which is not scientifically based. That is a theory-based idea.
No, wait, hold on. People express themselves on a spectrum. So you learn that.
That's a social.
True. The gender spectrum is just a theory. Well, people identify on that spectrum. So what the fuck? Like, what do you want? Like, teaching anybody anything else about gender would be lying to them, right? People identify on that spectrum. So maybe if we've all acknowledged that gender is social identification, which every fucking person has except for Ben, people fall on that spectrum. We should teach that fucking spectrum, obviously.
Hold on.
Based in different languages. Is that something you teach in science class, or is that something that you teach when you're teaching language?
So whether the fact that people want to express themselves on a spectrum, on a gender spectrum, whether that fact is something you want to put in a sociology class or in a science
By the
class.
way, not Ben guy is Neil fucking deGrasse Tyson. Okay, he's an annoying guy, but he does do some pretty good dunks.
Maybe that remains to be determined. But it is a real fact about real society.
Well, of course, nobody's denying.
That was such good shit. So the tactic of saying the fact, like he really drove in that.
In a science class.
You ready?
Maybe that remains to be determined. But it is a real fact about real society.
Well, of course, nobody's denying.
That is a real fact about real society, and then he can't argue it. Bam! Literally the biggest concession that Ben Shapiro has ever made on gender theory. No one's denying that people identify how they want to identify. You literally built your entire fucking industry on denying those people that right to people. Calling them fucking mentally ill or saying that they don't have the scientific right to do that. He says it's a fact. He's a very, qualified person to be speaking on this. He brings up that it's a fact because it is, and then he makes the biggest concession of his life like it isn't. Like it isn't the biggest concession of his life, but that's a fucking huge concession.
So
the question is, what is the relationship of that to biology? Meaning that the argument is made that trans women are women, for example. And what that seems to mean is that trans women are identical to women. Now, people want to say trans women are not biological women. Obviously, that is the case. But people...
Right. And everyone says that. Everyone acknowledges that trans women are not biologically women. That's a very, very easy concession for me to make. Yeah, I've never, ever like, why would someone argue that gender and sex need to be separated and then argue that a trans woman is a biological woman anyway?
People don't seem to want to say that, although that is obviously scientifically true. Trans women are not biological women. Biological women are biological women.
But where are you going with this? What are you trying?
Such a good question. What are you getting at? Because he can't come right out and say it, because he's already affirmed that people are free to identify however they want to identify.
Trying to accomplish by asking yourself, is it science or is it not science? It's people in society.
But this is a perfect example of an area where suddenly it's...
What are you getting at by asking if it's scientifically based? Doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's scientifically based. That's just how it is. Saying that this correct idea is not a part of one... is not completely a part of one, educational subsect. That's not an argument. And you're clearly getting at something, but that doesn't affect the validity of the claim. Something that I don't think Ben has ever been called for.
Matter to say things that are just true. Like, why is it bad or wrong to point out?
I have another way to...
And it's not bad or wrong to point out, but it's bad or wrong to point out in that context because we all know what you're getting at.
To fight someone and say, it's not biological, it's just it's real and it's there.
Well,
because it's real because it manifests.
But it is real because it manifests, but the question of how to classify manifestation is a scientific question. Meaning that, for example, there's a woman over at Brown University. She came out
It's also important to say that he says it's true because it manifests. So does that mean that it's true that woman is a woman?
Study that suggested that there was a phenomenon called rapid onset gender dysphoria, in which a member of a particular group would suffer from gender dysphoria.
Also, bad study. He brings up a study that brings up the idea of rapid onset gender dysphoria. Not real, or at least hasn't been found to be real. he brings up this idea to say that like exposing kids to transgender people will make them question their own gender, and so it will make them transgender themselves. That's, first of all, not backed, and second of all, the study that he's bringing up, its methodology was asking the mothers of a TERF website how they think their children became gender dysphoric. That was the methodology. They went to a TERF website, asked a bunch of moms, not the people. They asked their moms how they think their children became gender dysphoric, and that was the methodology of the study.
And this person's immediate peer group would suddenly have an onset of gender dysphoria. This paper was so controversial that Brown tried to pull it, and then was forced to reassign it later.
Also, they tried to pull it because the methodology was bad, and they realized that, so they tried to pull it for bad methodology. Conservatives pulled up like through such a fucking shitstorm that they had to put it back up, even though that it was wrong.
That's a different question. What you're asking now is, are there some topics that should not be studied scientifically?
Right.
And is there some taboo? And Sam Harris speaks a lot about this.
Yes.
And I think the concern is, if you study some topic that's a hot button topic and you bring scientific methods and tools to it, there.
Ah, God damn it! I'm giving Ben Shapiro money now.
Bring out the science and then let's hash it out. I think.
Also, that is not his position on gender dysphoria or climate change. If it was, he would be a liberal, or at least a left, or he would be a leftist, or at least a liberal, because the science is clear on climate change. Science is clear on trans validity. Let's see here. Yep, the social utility argument. How all of these organizations realize the distinction between sex and gender, so do all of these ones. Trans people have been present throughout all of culture. The term gender was introduced into the social science realm specifically for a distinction between biological sex and gender. Yeah, I mean, if he were for the science on this idea, he would also acknowledge that the best way to treat gender dysphoria is letting people transition. If he were for the science in this situation, he would be very clear. He would be very clearly left-leaning. If he were for the science when it comes to climate change, he would acknowledge that switching to green energy would be the best way to stop the inevitable doom of the fucking world. He would realize that yields would be cut by 35% due to 2100 due to climate change, or more food shortages, or poor air quality, disease transmitted between insects and rodents, the sea absorbing 30% carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels. Waterborne diseases would increase, more heat stress. If he were pro-science on those two issues specifically, Ben Shapiro wouldn't be Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro would be Neil deGrasse Tyson.
The problem I'm seeing with a lot of science.
What is your motivation?
Why does that matter?
It matters because if you have political power, you could end up creating legislation that subtracts freedoms from people who previously were enjoying the same freedoms as you. The history of that exercise
make a better argument.
doesn't end well.
Well, but the history of which exercise? Bring out all the science and let's hash it out.
Let's hear that again.
Why does that matter?
It matters because if you have political power, you could end up creating legislation that subtracts freedoms from people who previously were enjoying the same freedoms as you. The history of that exercise
make a better argument.
doesn't end well.
You don't listen to the fucking arguments, Ben. This is the first time you listened to the argument. You fucking hand waved it away. You don't listen. The reason that's not being legislated is because good arguments don't always sway people. Good arguments aren't always platformed. You're completely ignoring the lobbying power in America. Make a better argument doesn't solve this issue.
Well, but
I would beat Ben in a boxing match. No, I wouldn't. Have you seen The Gun Show? Have you seen like his weird obsession with his fucking biceps?
The Gun Show. I can't give the Gun Show every 5 seconds. I mean, what do you want from me, Sarah? Gun Show all day long.
No, stop.
Sarah,
Stop.
I already gave the Gun Show. I can't give the Gun Show every 5
Stop.
seconds. I mean, what do you want from me, Sarah?
Ah!
Gun Show.
Ah! What do you want? The gun show all day? Yeah, Ben would beat me in a boxing match. Did you see his guns? Did you see the gun show?
If you bring out all the science and the politicians hash it out, the history of that exercise is a recipe for disaster if it involves discoveries that put people's freedom, as defined in our Constitution, at risk.
But now you're arguing for limitations on areas of particular study.
No, I'm arguing on we need a way to shield, we need a way to protect people's freedoms in the face of whatever gets discovered scientifically.
So I
agree.
agree. I think that's what the Constitution is for, is to guard rights from...
But we're always fighting people who want rights are always fighting others who are saying they don't get the rights from the Constitution. This is a daily challenge on the progressive left. It is a daily challenge, right? Here's an example. I forgot how I ended up getting this phone call. It was some magazine that serves the gay community. And they want, I remember why, because they wanted my opinion on, they wanted my opinion about whether being gay was biological or mental.
Right, there's that new study that came out, this gas study.
Psychological,
Right,
okay?
right.
And I said, I don't care which it is. Find out what it is, fine. But the answer to that question should have no consequence on legislations or laws.
True.
Because, for example, suppose it said it's purely biological, okay? Then you say, oh, that explains it. Suppose it says it's purely psychological. What are you going to do now? You say, well, now you're going to go to the reorientation camps or whatever those are called, where they realign you because they say it's psychological rather than biological. All of a sudden, people start behaving in ways in society that want to constrict the freedom of expression of who and what people are.
How can you get more based than that? Why would it matter if gay people get equal rights based on if they were born that way or if they grew up to be a certain way? Why would that matter? Why does nature versus nurture matter when it comes to giving gay people equal rights or trans people equal rights?
And that is a danger. So maybe there needs to be a line in the sand. Let science do what it does, but politicians keep us free. Yet there's so many politicians that are doing the opposite of that.
So why aren't you a libertarian? I mean, I'm a libertarian. Come over here. Just
okay.
The line is right here.
You're not a libertarian. That's the thing. He's actually making libertarian ideas. You're arguing against libertarian ideas. The reason he is a libertarian. Why does it why does motivation matter? Something that he didn't say. Ever heard of history? Something that doesn't combat that. He says nothing in so many words. How 2 + 2 = 5? Gotta love that. That's not played out. 1984. That's still funny. He seems so scared to get canceled. He can't admit that biology is objective. When the fuck did he say biology wasn't objective? Literally just never said that. Also poisoning the well by saying he's just scared to get canceled and that's why he doesn't agree with you. But on top of that, he never said what you're saying he said. It's wild how this guy has cultivated such an audience to even when he clearly loses, he can't lose. Also, I lied. This wasn't the hardest dunking. It was the BBC interview. The BBC interview was a harsher dunking, and then it was this. And then it was the rap isn't music one. But yeah, he's cultivated such an audience that even when he loses, he can't lose.